The Atlantic Ocean, in its calmer moods, served as a serene, blue-gray backdrop to the manicured existence within the Seabreeze Shores subdivision. But today, it was a churning, slate-gray beast, spitting white foam against the shore break, its power amplified by a potent late-season coastal storm system spinning relentlessly offshore. The salt spray, driven inland by fierce, gusting northeasterly winds, wasn't just a familiar taste today. It was a physical presence, coating windows with a translucent film, stinging exposed skin, and carrying the deep, resonant roar of the angry surf miles inland. For Lieutenant Commander Noah Pierce, observing the churning sea from the storm-lashed windows of Coast Guard Air Station Cape Isabella, this raw display of nature's power wasn't an inconvenience, it was his operational environment. After 2 demanding decades piloting MH-65 Dolphin search and rescue helicopters up and down the eastern seaboard, he understood the ocean's moods intimately, its deceptive beauty, its sudden fury, its profound indifference to human ambition or frailty. He'd plucked grateful but terrified fishermen from the decks of sinking trawlers and seas that would swallow mountains, hovered precariously beside sheer cliffs to rescue stranded hikers, and coordinated vast, often heartbreakingly futile search patterns over limitless stretches of unforgiving water for souls claimed by the deep. The constant tension, the weight of responsibility, the unpredictable schedule that played havoc with personal plans, it had taken its toll. Recently, contemplating the approaching milestone of 20 years of service, Noah had begun to crave a measure of terrestrial peace, a quiet harbor after decades navigating storms both literal and figurative. He thought he'd found a semblance of that peace 6 months ago in Seabreeze Shores, a sprawling, upscale coastal community located just 5 miles south of the air station. He purchased a modest, unassuming, weathered cedar shingle cottage, nestled somewhat incongruously amongst much larger, newer homes on a quiet cul-de-sac named Willow Lane. The cottage itself was structurally sound but undeniably dated, needing fresh paint, landscaping that extended beyond struggling grass patches, and a new roof in the near future. But its location offered an easy commute to the station, and more importantly, its west-facing rear deck provided an unobstructed, soul-soothing panoramic view of the vast Atlantic horizon. Watching the sunset paint the sky in fiery hues over that endless expanse of water, even after a grueling duty cycle, felt like anchoring his restless spirit, a small measure of tranquility earned. He'd hoped for quiet anonymity, a chance to decompress, perhaps finally learn to surf properly on the local break, and enjoy the simple rhythms of shore life when not on alert. His one significant material indulgence, a purchase made shortly after moving in, sat parked proudly, if perhaps, in the eyes of some, jarringly, in the short, cracked concrete driveway beside the cottage. It was his Jeep Gladiator pickup truck. But it wasn't the gleaming, chrome-laden, showroom stock version one might see cruising the beachfront boulevards. Noah's Gladiator was unequivocally a tool, meticulously customized, a rugged, four-wheeled reflection of his demanding profession and deeply ingrained off-duty passion for maritime safety and surf zone rescue readiness. Its original factory deep blue paint was visibly faded in patches from relentless sun exposure, aggressively sandblasted to a dull matte finish along the lower rocker panels and fender flares from countless excursions onto abrasive beach access trails. Its bodywork bore numerous honorable scars, small dents on the tailgate from loading heavy gear, deep scratches along the sides from navigating overgrown coastal tracks, testament to its frequent use in challenging environments. Bolted securely to its reinforced steel frame were practical, essential modifications, a powerful, 12,000-pound capacity electric winch recessed into a heavy-duty steel front bumper. Multiple sturdy Deering recovery points welded strategically front and rear, reinforced skid plates protecting the undercarriage, and custom-fabricated roof rack mounts designed specifically for carrying specialized rescue equipment. Often, depending on the season and anticipated conditions, strapped securely and neatly within the truck's utilitarian bed or mounted alongside it, were Noah's personal collection of specialized surf rescue gear. 2 10-foot high-buoyancy rescue paddleboards, several coils of thick, brightly colored tow straps and throw ropes, a comprehensive, waterproof trauma kit equipped for immediate field stabilization, high-intensity waterproof spotlights, and sometimes even a compact, deflated rapid deployment inflatable rescue sled for shallow water operations. To Noah, the Gladiator wasn't merely transportation between his cottage and the air station. It was an extension of his professional ethos, his personal commitment to readiness. It was a tangible symbol of his unwavering dedication to maritime safety, a capable platform allowing him to potentially render life-saving assistance even when technically off the clock. responding to localized surf emergencies or assisting other agencies. Its rugged, weathered appearance wasn't a flaw. It was proof of its capability, its purpose. Its dents and scratches were badges of honor, not blemishes. Its inherent worth lay in its function, not its cosmetic perfection. This pragmatic, service-oriented perspective on vehicle aesthetics, however, was fundamentally, violently incompatible with the worldview espoused by Daphne Ellington, the formidable, impeccably coiffed, and universally feared chairwoman of the Seabreeze Shores Homeowners Association. Daphne reigned perhaps, from a sprawling, ostentatious, multi-million-dollar Mediterranean-style stucco mansion situated prominently, almost confrontationally, at the closed, bulbous end of the very same Willow Lane cul-de-sac where Noah's modest cottage sat humbly near the entrance. Her palatial home, a monument to excessive square footage and questionable architectural taste, stood surrounded by acres of meticulously sculpted, unnaturally green topiary. Elaborate imported Italian marble fountains that burbled with programmed indifference, and vast, rolling beds of prize-winning, genetically perfect azaleas requiring constant, expensive tending by uniformed landscaping crews. Daphne's estate represented the absolute pinnacle of the idealized, fiercely protected Seabreeze Shores aesthetic, an aesthetic defined by pristine surfaces, flawless conformity, and the conspicuous display of wealth. An aesthetic Daphne guarded with the fierce, unwavering, often ruthless vigilance of a particularly status-conscious Cerberus defending the gates of a gated community's imagined underworld. From the very first moment Noah Pierce's battle-scarred, equipment-laden gladiator appeared in his humble driveway, clearly visible from her second-story Palladian windows, Daphne viewed it not just with disapproval, but with open, visceral hostility. To her discerning, critical eye, accustomed only to the silent gliding of immaculate white Range Rovers, gleaming black Teslas, and perhaps the occasional vintage Porsche gracing the expensive paver-stone driveways of her immediate, equally affluent neighbors, Noah's utilitarian Jeep was an unacceptable anomaly. It was a rugged eyesore, a dilapidated commercial vehicle despite being privately owned, rusty, dented monstrosity, a gross exaggeration, as the sandblasting protected against significant rust, and the dents were relatively minor. It was, in her firmly, unshakably held opinion, a jarring, offensive visual blight that single-handedly threatened to undermine years of her hard work in cultivating an image of exclusive coastal luxury, thereby potentially dragging down the meticulously inflated property values of the entire exclusive cul-de-sac, most especially her own multi-million-dollar investment. The Jeep's very presence, its unapologetic functionality, its visible signs of hard use in harsh environments, seemed to mock the carefully enforced HOA covenants regarding vehicle appearance, lawn maintenance, mandatory landscape uniformity, and overall aesthetic conformity, rules Daphne considered not merely guidelines, but sacred commandments essential to preserving the delicate financial and social ecosystem of Seabreeze Shores. Commandments it was her solemn, self-appointed duty to enforce without fear or favor. The first official salvo in what would become a protracted, one-sided war arrived with bureaucratic swiftness, appearing in Noah's mailbox less than a week after he had finished unpacking the last box in his new cottage. A crisp, cream-colored, heavy-stock envelope, bearing the ostentatious, gold foil-embossed official logo of the Seabreeze Shores Homeowners Association, contained a formally worded letter. Signed with a flourish by Daphne Ellington herself, in her capacity as HOA chairwoman, it politely but firmly cited Article 7, Section 3, Paragraph B of the voluminous Covenants, Conditions and Restrictions, CC and RS. A paragraph dealing vaguely with maintaining vehicles in good and sightly condition. The letter requested, with thinly veiled condescension, that Noah address the non-compliant aesthetic condition of the blue Jeep Gladiator pickup truck currently parked in his driveway. It specifically mentioned, as points of violation, the vehicle's excessive visible wear and tear, including significant paint fading and multiple body dents, its non-standard, potentially unapproved external modifications, referring presumably to the winch and recovery points, and, most offensively to Daphne's sensibilities, the improperly stored external recreational and or commercial equipment, clearly referencing his prominently displayed surf rescue boards. Noah read the letter standing in his Spartan kitchen, the smell of salt air still clinging to his flight suit from his commute home. He scanned it with a weary sigh, a familiar feeling of exasperation washing over him. He'd navigated complex Coast Guard regulations, dealt with congressional inquiries, mediated disputes between stressed crew members in life-or-death situations, the petty, cosmetic complaints of a neighborhood homeowners association seemed trivial, almost comically insignificant by comparison. He tossed the letter onto the small pile of junk mail accumulating on his sparsely furnished kitchen counter, his mind already preoccupied with analyzing the latest satellite weather imagery predicting the formation of the tropical depression currently spinning harmlessly far offshore, but potentially strengthening. A second letter from Daphne arrived precisely 2 weeks later, its tone noticeably sharper, less polite, more demanding. This communication referenced the initial notice, lamented his apparent lack of response, formally cited additional clauses from the CC and RS relating to nuisance vehicles and failure to maintain community standards, and introduced the concept of accumulated daily fines, $50 per day, retroactive to the date of the first notice, for continued noncompliance. It demanded immediate, verifiable corrective action, specifically the complete removal or cosmetic restoration of the offending vehicle, to bring it into conformity with the established aesthetic harmony of Seabreeze shores. Noah, returning late and exhausted from a grueling 24-hour duty cycle that had involved coordinating a complex multi-agency response to a grounded freighter leaking fuel, glanced at the second letter briefly, noted the escalating rhetoric and the mention of fines, snorted softly in disbelief, and then filed it, along with the first letter, in a simple manila folder he'd ironically labeled Shore Leave Entertainment, HOA Division. He had far more pressing concerns. Daphne Ellington, however, was not a woman accustomed to being ignored, dismissed, or having her authority questioned, especially by a newcomer residing in one of the cul-de-sac's less prestigious properties. Her carefully constructed position of power within the intricate social hierarchy of Seabreeze shores relied heavily on the perception of unwavering control and the expectation of prompt, unquestioning compliance from all residents regarding her interpretations of the HOA rules. Noah's apparent, ongoing disregard for her clearly communicated directives, coupled with the continued, daily visual affront of his non-conforming gladiator parked defiantly, almost insolently, in plain sight of her mansion, escalated her initial irritation into a simmering, focused fury. She began complaining more vociferously, more strategically, to other members of the HOA board and to influential neighbors whose opinions mattered, carefully framing Noah not just as negligent, but as a disrespectful outsider. A transient military type with no appreciation for property values or community standards, intentionally flouting the rules that maintained their shared paradise and protected their significant financial investments. She conveniently omitted any mention of his rank, his decades of dedicated Coast Guard service, or the vital role the nearby air station played in regional safety, focusing solely, obsessively, on the perceived aesthetic transgressions of his utilitarian vehicle. Some neighbors, particularly those residing closest to Daphne's sphere of influence or those genuinely sharing her hypersensitive concern for appearances and property values, nodded sympathetically, readily agreeing that the Jeep was indeed a bit much for Seabreeze shores. Others, however, especially those who had lived in the area longer, perhaps had family members in the military, or simply possessed a broader perspective on life beyond manicured lawns, felt deeply uncomfortable with Daphne's increasingly personal and vindictive campaign against the decorated pilot. Yet, knowing Daphne's propensity for holding grudges and wielding HOA regulations as weapons, few dared to challenge her openly or voice support for Noah, opting instead for uneasy silence. Finally, frustrated by Noah's continued noncompliance and perhaps emboldened by the lack of overt opposition from her peers, Daphne decided on what she considered decisive, final action. A third envelope arrived at Noah's cottage late on a Thursday afternoon. This one wasn't placed gently in the mailbox. It was delivered via certified mail, return receipt requested, requiring Noah's signature upon delivery, a clear escalation in formality and implied threat. Inside wasn't another polite request or a notification of fines. It was a harsh, legalistic, unambiguous ultimatum, drafted likely with input from the HOA's notoriously aggressive law firm. The letter formally declared the blue Jeep Gladiator, citing its license plate number, to be in persistent, flagrant violation of multiple HOA covenants. It stated, in stark, unequivocal terms, that if the aforementioned offending vehicle, specifically the heavily dented, non-standard blue Jeep Gladiator pickup truck, along with all associated external rescue paraphernalia and equipment, was not permanently removed from public view within the Seabreeze Shores subdivision, meaning either securely garaged out of sight, stored entirely off-property, or otherwise disposed of, within precisely 4848 hours of his documented receipt of. This notice, the Seabreeze Shores Homeowners Association Board of Directors, acting under the authority granted by Article 12, Section 5 of the CC and RS, would exercise its contractual right to have the vehicle forcibly towed and impounded by quicklift towing at the registered owner's sole and considerable expense. Furthermore, the letter ominously warned, all accrued fines, towing charges, impound fees, and associated legal costs would be levied against his property account, potentially leading to the filing of a formal property lien if not paid promptly. The deadline for complete removal was explicitly set for noon on the upcoming Saturday. Noah signed for the certified letter, the postal carrier offering a sympathetic shrug, clearly aware of the HOA's reputation. He read the ultimatum standing in his doorway, the stiff legal paper trembling slightly in his hand, not from fear, but from a surge of cold, weary anger. He had just returned from an intense, 3-hour flight crew briefing detailing the rapidly intensifying coastal storm system currently churning offshore. A system now predicted to generate hurricane-force wind gusts and extremely hazardous sea conditions along their entire sector over the critical weekend period. The air station commander had placed the entire base, including Noah's search and rescue unit, on heightened alert status, effective immediately. Reading Daphne's petty, vindictive ultimatum, with its myopic focus on purely cosmetic details and neighborhood power plays, juxtaposed starkly against the imminent, real-world potential for major maritime emergencies and lives hanging in the balance just miles offshore, felt profoundly surreal, deeply offensive, and utterly disconnected from the weighty responsibilities and genuine dangers that defined his actual existence. He crumpled the thick legal paper in his fist, momentarily tempted to march down the cul-de-sac and confront Daphne directly, forcefully explaining the difference between HOA regulations and saving human lives. But years of disciplined service had taught him restraint. Confrontation would likely be futile, possibly escalate the situation unnecessarily. A pragmatic part of him recognized the potential for significant, expensive, and distracting hassle if Daphne, in her vindictive state, actually followed through with the towing threat while he was potentially hundreds of miles offshore. Airborne on a critical rescue mission, unable to intervene. He resolved, reluctantly, to deal with the Jeep situation immediately after the storm passed and the heightened alert was lifted, probably Saturday afternoon or Sunday morning. He would find temporary off-site storage for the Gladiator, a galling, inconvenient, but perhaps necessary concession to avoid further conflict with the unreasonable HOA chairwoman. He tossed the crumpled ultimatum onto his kitchen counter, beside the previous letters, his mind already shifting decisively back to analyzing updated weather charts, calculating maximum helicopter endurance under projected wind conditions, and reviewing emergency hoist procedures with his crew. He had lives to potentially save. Daphne Ellington's aesthetic sensibilities and bruised ego would simply have to wait. Friday night bled seamlessly, restlessly into Saturday morning under an ominous, bruised, rapidly darkening sky. The predicted coastal storm, now officially designated Tropical Storm Brenda but packing near hurricane-force gusts in its outer bands, was churning vigorously, erratically just 50 miles offshore, kicking up mountainous, chaotic seas and driving torrential rain squalls across the entire coastline. At Coast Guard Air Station Cape Isabella, the operational tempo was palpable, the atmosphere tense, focused, electric with readiness. Yellow hazard lights pulsed rhythmically across the rain-lashed tarmac. Noah Pierce, as the designated senior aircraft commander on duty for this critical operational period, moved with quiet intensity through the pre-dawn readiness checks, personally verifying the status of both primary MH-65 Dolphin search and rescue helicopters. His main aircraft, H-378, call sign Guardian 78, sat fully fueled, rotors secured against the gale force winds, avionics tested, rescue hoist mechanism double-checked, ready for immediate launch at a moment's notice. His highly experienced flight crew, co-pilot Lieutenant Jessica Chen, a sharp, unflappable aviator, flight mechanic avionics electrical technician second-class Marcus Jonesy Jones, a wizard with the aircraft's complex systems, and the two elite rescue swimmers, aviation survival technician first-class David Gallo, a decorated veteran of countless rescues, and aviation survival technician third-class Maya Flores, younger but incredibly strong and cool under pressure, moved through their pre-flight checks and personal preparations with the practiced, almost silent efficiency born of rigorous training and shared high-stakes experience. They all knew the conditions currently raging offshore were deteriorating rapidly into truly treacherous territory. It wasn't a question of if they would get a launch order today, but when, and likely, how many. The inevitable call came crackling urgently over the secure radio network shortly after 10 a.m., relayed directly from the Coast Guard's Sector Command Center. A garbled, frantic, partially unintelligible mayday transmission, relayed via VHF radio from a nearby commercial freighter that had picked up the initial distress call, reported a 40-foot recreational charter fishing boat, identified as the Sea Serpent, caught helplessly in the storm's strengthening northwestern quadrant, having suffered complete engine failure and subsequently capsized violently on the notoriously treacherous, shallow Blackfish Reef, located less than 2 nautical miles. Directly offshore from the coastline adjacent to the Seabreeze Shores subdivision. Multiple persons, initial reports suggested 6 to 8 individuals, were confirmed in the water, some possibly injured during the capsizing, all battling dangerously steep, breaking waves whipped up by 60-knot wind gusts in the chillingly cold, turbulent Atlantic water. Survival time in such conditions, even with life vests, was measured in minutes, not hours. Instantly, the controlled readiness of the air station erupted into focused, high-gear action. Launch Guardian 7-8. Aircrew, man your aircraft. Scramble SR mission, Blackfish Reef. Noah's command cut through the tense quiet of the ready room, his voice calm but imbued with an unmistakable urgency that galvanized everyone into immediate motion. He and his designated crew sprinted across the windswept, rain-slicked tarmac towards H-378, whose powerful twin-turbine engines were already spooling up with a rising, piercing whine, ground crew hastily removing rotor ties and wool chocks. Strapping rapidly into the familiar command seat in the cockpit, Noah immediately began coordinating with Chan over the rescue plan and optimal search pattern, simultaneously running through critical pre-takeoff checklists, while Jonesy and the swimmers secured themselves and their extensive rescue gear in the main cabin. Based on the last known reported location of the capsized vessel and the prevailing strong onshore winds pushing survivors rapidly towards the coastline's dangerous surf zone, immediate aerial deployment and recovery were absolutely critical. Surface rescue boats, even the Coast Guard's capable 47-foot motor lifeboats launched from the nearest station, would take far too long to reach the scene while battling the mountainous seas and pounding shore break. This was a mission tailor-made for the helicopter's unique capabilities. Okay, people, listen up, here's the brief. Noah's voice came crisply, clearly over the internal aircraft communication system as H-378 lifted powerfully off the tarmac, rotors biting hard into the gale force wind. Banking sharply southwards towards the distress coordinates less than 5 minutes after the initial alert. Capsized charter vessel, Sea Serpent, vicinity Blackfish Reef. Multiple PBs, persons on board, reported in the water, precise number unconfirmed, assume 8. Sea state extremely rough, 15 to 20-foot breaking swells, wind gusting 60 knots from the northeast, visibility marginal due to heavy rain squalls. Our primary objective is immediate recovery of survivors from the water. Secondary is establishing the safest, closest possible landing zone for rapid patient transfer to ground EMS and potential triage if necessary. Time is critical due to severe hypothermia risk. He paused, then addressed his co-pilot directly. Jess, confirm LZ assessment based on real-time conditions. What's our primary option closest to the surf line near those coordinates, minimizing overflight of populated areas but ensuring safe approach and departure vectors? Lieutenant Chen, already rapidly scanning digital topographical maps overlaid with real-time weather radar and aeronautical hazard charts on her multifunction console display, responded immediately. Her voice calm and precise despite the helicopter bucking in the turbulence. Sir, analyzing proximity to the reef's southern edge, current wind direction vectoring survivors towards shore, and avoiding direct overflight of beachfront structures, the optimal LZ, providing the safest approach path and largest clear. Paved surface area, appears to be, hold on, coordinates confirm. It's the paved cul-de-sac at the terminus of Willow Lane within the Seabreeze Shores residential subdivision. It offers a wide-open paved circle, clear approaches from the east over the dunes, and minimal noted vertical obstructions like power lines or tall trees in the immediate vicinity. Noah felt another sudden, unwelcome jolt of profound ironic recognition wash over him, even amidst the intense focus required to pilot the aircraft through the violent storm conditions. Willow Lane's cul-de-sac. The one visually dominated by Daphne Ellington's ridiculously oversized mansion. The one where his own humble cottage sat near the entrance, currently sheltering his non-compliant Jeep Gladiator. The one where Daphne's arbitrary 48-hour eviction notice for that very Jeep was ticking steadily, relentlessly towards its noon deadline, now less than 90 minutes away. A grim, humorless, almost imperceptible smile touched Noah's lips beneath his oxygen mask. Fate, it seemed, possessed a truly peculiar, wickedly pointed sense of timing and poetic justice. LZ confirmed, Lieutenant, Noah replied instantly, his voice purely professional, betraying absolutely none of the internal, dark amusement, or personal context. Operational necessity, mission safety, and the potential saving of human lives trumped petty neighborhood politics and personal irony every single time. That was the core tenet of his service. Designate Willow Lane cul-de-sac as primary LZ Alpha. Notify Sector Command and local emergency services, fire rescue, EMS, Sheriff's Office, of our intentions, LZ coordinates, and estimated time of arrival for patient handover. Jonesy, he switched channels briefly. Brief the swimmers. Prepare for potential multiple hypothermic casualties, possible trauma from vessel impact, standard recovery protocols in high sea state. Expect challenging hoist operations. Minutes later, after a turbulent, low-level flight battling driving rain and shearing winds, H-378 arrived decisively on scene over the chaotic waters surrounding Blackfish Reef. The sight below was starkly grim, a testament to the storm's fury. The charter boat's white hull, completely overturned, resembling a wounded whale wallowing heavily in the massive, churning, foam-streaked gray waves. A wide debris field, splintered wood, coolers, fishing gear, seat cushions, spread outwards from the wreck. And amidst the chaos, several small, dark figures, thankfully clad in bright orange life vests, bobbed precariously, tossed about like helpless corks in the tumultuous sea, clearly struggling against the powerful current inexorably pulling them towards the thundering shore break less than a mile away. Without hesitation, Noah expertly, instinctively maneuvered the powerful Dolphin helicopter, using every ounce of his 20 years' experience to counter the fierce, unpredictable wind gusts, establishing a remarkably stable hover 50 feet above the heaving waves near the largest cluster of survivors. On his command, rescue swimmers David Gallo and Maya Flores, epitomes of Coast Guard courage, training, and skill, were immediately deployed via the rescue hoist into the raging, frigid water below. Working with incredible speed, strength, and practiced efficiency in the dangerously high seas, they swam powerfully towards the survivors, assessed injuries, provided reassurance, secured rescue slings and baskets, and began the arduous, physically demanding process of preparing each chilled, exhausted individual for hoisting up into the relative safety of the helicopter's cabin. Jonesy, the flight mechanic, operated the hoist with precision from the open cabin door, while Lieutenant Chun provided crucial communication and coordination from the cockpit. Within 15 intense, focused minutes, they successfully recovered 4 individuals directly from the water near the reef, all conscious, thankfully, but suffering from significant hypothermia, shock, and minor injuries. Jonesy and the swimmers immediately began administering critical first aid in the cramped cabin, stripping wet clothing, applying warming blankets, checking vital signs. Just as the 4th survivor was safely aboard, Chin spotted movement closer to shore. "Sir, visual contact. 2 more POBs nearing the surf zone, approximately 1/2 mile southeast of our current position," she reported urgently, pointing through the rain-streaked windscreen. "They appear to be clinging to debris, being swept rapidly through the outer breakers. Conditions closer in look extremely hazardous, too shallow and turbulent for safe swimmer deployment or hoist operations from this altitude. Recommend immediate transport of current casualties to LZ Alpha, and then immediate return for aerial search and vectoring surface assets to the remaining 2, if possible." "Agreed, Jess. Good call," Noah confirmed instantly, already banking the heavily loaded helicopter sharply towards the nearby coastline, visible intermittently through the driving rain squalls. "Time to get these first 4 stabilized on the ground. Jonesy, keep me updated on patient status. Maya, David, prepare yourselves and the casualties for rapid offload procedures upon landing at LZ Alpha." As 378 roared towards the shore, rapidly descending towards the designated landing zone on Willow Lane. The unusual, powerful, throbbing sound of its rotors battling the storm, combined with the dramatic sight of the large, gray and orange Coast Guard helicopter flying unusually low over their rooftops, drew the residents of Seabreeze shores out of their homes despite the foul weather. Drawn by curiosity, concern, and perhaps a neighborly instinct, they began to gather cautiously at the edges of the wide Willow Lane cul-de-sac, sheltering under umbrellas or porch overhangs, their faces turned upwards towards the approaching aircraft. They watched, initially bewildered, then increasingly awestruck, as the large, powerful machine flared dramatically for landing. Its intense rotor wash flattening meticulously maintained flower beds, sending unsecured recycling bins skittering across driveways like tumbleweeds, and whipping the surface of Daphne Ellington's pristine, imported Italianate koi pond into a miniature, frothing tempest. The helicopter settled firmly, precisely onto the wide, empty asphalt circle at the exact center of the cul-de-sac, its landing gear compressing with a slight sigh, its rotor blades beginning to slowly wind down, but still generating a significant, palpable downdraft that ruffled hair and clothing 50 yards away. The time displayed clearly on Noah's cockpit chronometer read 11:58 and 15 seconds a.m. Daphne Ellington's arbitrary 48-hour deadline for the removal of his Jeep Gladiator had technically not yet expired, but the undeniably dramatic arrival of his other, considerably larger, government-issue vehicle was certainly making an unavoidable, high-impact statement. Noah, focused intently on coordinating the next steps, saw Daphne Ellington emerge abruptly from the ornate, oversized front door of her mansion, her normally immaculate blonde hair slightly askew from the wind, her face a mask of pure disbelief rapidly contorting into apoplectic outrage as she witnessed the powerful rotor wash flattening a cherished row of her meticulously pruned, excessively pampered, prize-winning azalea bushes that bordered her perfect lawn. She started marching purposefully, furiously, towards the helicopter, her body language radiating indignant fury, clearly intending to unleash a torrent of complaints about property damage and unauthorized landings. She stopped short, however, pulling up abruptly near the edge of her lawn as the helicopter's main cabin door slid open smoothly, and the stark, undeniable reality of the situation became immediately, unavoidable apparent. Rescue swimmers Gallo and Flores leaped out onto the wet asphalt, moving with urgent purpose, immediately assisting flight mechanic Jones in carefully, gently helping the four shivering, wide-eyed survivors, now wrapped cocoon-like in silver and orange emergency hypothermia blankets, out of the helicopter cabin and onto the pavement below. An awaiting county ambulance, alerted by Coast Guard dispatch moments earlier, was already racing down Willow Lane, its siren wailing plaintively against the wind, its emergency lights flashing urgently. Neighbors, witnessing the genuine human drama unfolding, surged forward instinctively, not with complaints about flattened flowers or noise, but with spontaneous offers of dry blankets from their own homes, steaming thermoses of hot coffee, words of comfort, and offers of assistance to the clearly distressed individuals rescued moments before from the raging sea. Daphne Ellington stood frozen, isolated on the edge of her perfect, azalea-strewn lawn, her intended tirade about property values, noise ordinances, and unauthorized landings dying unspoken on her lips as she was forced to witness the raw, urgent, life-and-death reality of a professional rescue operation unfolding literally on her doorstep, eclipsing entirely her petty, self-absorbed concerns. She watched, momentarily silenced by the sheer, undeniable weight of the event, as the uniformed ambulance crew efficiently assessed and loaded the four hypothermic, exhausted passengers, their faces pale, chapped, and etched with the trauma of their near-death experience. She watched as Lieutenant Commander Noah Pierce, clearly visible in the helicopter's cockpit, gave crisp, professional instructions over his radio headset, calmly coordinating the complex patient handover with the ground EMS team. She watched as several of her own neighbors, people she often condescended to, instinctively formed a human chain to help carry medical equipment from the ambulance through the driving rain. She watched, perhaps for the first time, as her carefully constructed, hermetically sealed world of aesthetic rules, social status, and petty neighborhood grievances collided head-on, shattering against the undeniable, visceral, fundamental importance of human life, selfless service, and genuine community response in the face of crisis. As the ambulance, loaded with the rescued fishermen, sped away quickly towards the hospital, its lights flashing, its siren briefly rising then fading as it turned onto the main coastal highway, Noah gave the prearranged signal to his crew on the ground. Gallo and Flores quickly secured the cabin door, giving him a thumbs up. The Dolphin's powerful engines immediately spooled up again to full power with a deafening roar that momentarily drowned out even the howling wind. With a final instrument check and a nod from Chun, H-378 lifted gracefully, vertically, from the center of the cul-de-sac, ascending rapidly back into the turbulent, storm-gray sky, banking sharply back towards the ocean to resume its patrol, hoping to locate the two remaining individuals reported closer to shore or to vector surface rescue assets towards their position. As the imposing helicopter dwindled rapidly from view, disappearing back into the gray scud, a spontaneous, heartfelt cheer, mixed with genuine, appreciative applause, erupted from the assembled neighbors huddled under their umbrellas, their faces wet with rain but shining with admiration. The applause was directed not at Daphne Ellington, who remained standing alone, motionless, on her damaged lawn, but unequivocally at the departing Coast Guard helicopter and the quiet, skilled professional who piloted the remarkable machine. Daphne remained standing there for a long moment after the helicopter was gone, isolated, surrounded by her flattened prize azaleas and the judging eyes of her neighbors, her carefully maintained authority utterly, irrevocably diminished, eclipsed by the raw power of nature and the undeniable spectacle of human heroism unfolding literally in her front yard. The story, naturally, and perhaps inevitably in the age of ubiquitous smartphones and viral content, didn't end with the helicopter's departure. Several neighbors, initially drawn out by the storm and the unusual aircraft noise, had captured surprisingly clear, dramatic cell phone footage of the entire event. The powerful helicopter landing precisely in the cul-de-sac, the efficient rescue operation unfolding amidst the wind and rain, the transfer of the hypothermic survivors to the waiting ambulance, and the aircraft's impressive departure back into the storm. Within hours, as word of the daring Coast Guard rescue conducted under extremely challenging storm conditions spread through the community and online, the local television news channels picked up the story. Alerted perhaps by scanner traffic, tips from witnesses, or the ambulance arrival at the hospital, they eagerly acquired and began broadcasting the compelling amateur footage. The rescue itself was inherently dramatic, a perfect human interest story for the evening news. But then, inevitably, someone, perhaps one of the neighbors finally fed up with years of Daphne's bullying HOA tactics, perhaps a sympathetic town hall clerk with access to records, perhaps even a curious reporter digging for more background on the unusual suburban landing zone, leaked copies of Daphne Ellington's series of petty, demanding HOA violation letters, and, crucially, the final, harsh 48-hour ultimatum concerning Lieutenant Commander Noah Pierce's supposedly non-compliant eyesore, Jeep Gladiator. The juxtaposition presented by the news outlets was stark, immediate, and devastatingly effective for Daphne's already tarnished reputation. News segments aired the heroic rescue footage, the powerful helicopter, the dedicated crew battling the elements, the grateful survivors being brought ashore, immediately followed by sharp, focused close-ups of Daphne's meticulously worded, officious complaints about purely cosmetic issues, minor dents, paint scratches, and improperly stored external recreational equipment on Noah's rescue-ready personal vehicle. The contrast between Noah's life-saving actions and Daphne's trivial, harassing preoccupations was inescapable, painting her in the worst possible light. The public backlash against Daphne Ellington and, by association, the perceived elitism of the Seabreeze Shores HOA was instantaneous, intense, and widespread, exploding across regional social media platforms, local online forums, and igniting fiery debate on call-in radio talk shows. Daphne became an overnight regional meme, the poster child for the out-of-touch, petty HOA Karen. Her obsession with appearances hilariously and damningly contrasted with the genuine heroism and vital service represented by the Coast Guard pilot, she had targeted. City officials, acutely sensitive to public opinion and likely seeking to capitalize on the wave of pro-Coast Guard sentiment while distancing themselves from the HOA controversy, responded with performative swiftness. The mayor issued a formal public statement profusely commending Lieutenant Commander Pierce and the entire crew of H-378 for their bravery and professionalism during the successful rescue operation, pointedly praising Noah's unwavering dedication to duty both on the job and, implicitly, through his readiness off duty. Furthermore, motivated by the public outcry and perhaps nudged by discreet inquiries from Noah's commanding officer at the air station, the city council convened an emergency session. Citing Noah's status as a decorated active-duty military member and certified first responder, and acknowledging the potential life-saving utility of his uniquely equipped personal vehicle, they passed a targeted municipal resolution. This resolution formally recognized Noah Pierce's specifically outfitted Jeep Gladiator pickup truck as a privately owned emergency response support vehicle, thereby granting it explicit, permanent exemption from any and all current or future municipal or homeowners association cosmetic ordinances, rules, or regulations within city limits. The resolution was a clear, unambiguous, and very public rebuke of Daphne Ellington's harassing actions and a strong affirmation of support for Noah. Within the shell-shocked Seabreeze Shores HOA itself, the internal fallout was equally dramatic, though perhaps less publicly visible. Faced with intense pressure from dozens of suddenly emboldened, outraged residents, many of whom now openly expressed regret for their previous silence in the face of Daphne's intimidation, the remaining members of the HOA board convened their own emergency meeting behind closed doors. Daphne Ellington, though present, found herself completely isolated, stripped of her usual allies and influence, facing a tidal wave of long-suppressed resentment. The board, eager to distance themselves from her disastrous public relations debacle and restore some semblance of normalcy and credibility, voted overwhelmingly and decisively on several key measures. First, they voted to immediately rescind all previously issued violation notices, warnings, and accumulated fines levied against Lieutenant Commander Noah Pierce concerning the appearance or parking of his Jeep Gladiator, effectively wiping his slate clean. Second, they passed a formal, strongly worded motion of censure against Daphne Ellington herself, condemning her actions in targeting and harassing a decorated member of the United States Armed Forces, prioritizing trivial aesthetic concerns over potential emergency readiness and community safety, demonstrating poor judgment and abuse of authority, and ultimately bringing significant negative publicity, embarrassment, and ridicule upon the entire Seabreeze Shores community. While the complex HOA bylaws prevented her immediate removal from the presidency without a full membership recall vote, a process deemed too divisive at the time, the censure effectively stripped her of any remaining moral authority or practical influence on the board. Her reign, for all intents and purposes, was over. She became a figurehead in name only, isolated and largely ignored by the very neighbors she had sought to dominate. A few days later, under a clear, calm, sun-drenched sky that seemed worlds away from the storm's recent fury, Noah Pierce stood peacefully in his own driveway, a garden hose in hand, methodically, almost meditatively, washing the dried salt spray, wind-blown sand, and grime from the surfaces of his trusty blue Gladiator. The dents were still there, badges of functional honor. The scratches remained, telling stories of past challenges overcome. The rescue boards were strapped securely, ready for potential use, in the back. He worked quietly, purposefully, the rhythmic, familiar motion of the soapy sponge gliding over the faded but resilient paint almost therapeutic. He felt a quiet, profound sense of vindication, certainly, but more importantly, a renewed, deepened appreciation for the supportive neighbors who had ultimately rallied around him, for the inherent value of his service acknowledged by the city, and for the fundamental importance of maintaining perspective, of distinguishing between genuine crises demanding courage and sacrifice, and manufactured dramas fueled by ego and insecurity. He dried the Jeep carefully with a soft towel, then reached into the cab's glove compartment and pulled out a small, newly acquired vinyl bumper sticker he'd ordered online the day after the storm. He carefully peeled off the protective backing and smoothed it firmly onto the center of the Jeep's sandblasted rear bumper, just below the sturdy steel tow hitch, ensuring it was perfectly level. The sticker depicted a simple, minimalist line drawing of a Coast Guard MH-65 Dolphin helicopter silhouetted against a stylized rising sun. Beneath the image, stark white letters spelled out a concise, evocative message. Grounded today? Look up tomorrow. It was a quiet, personal statement, a subtle reminder of perspective, resilience, and the vast difference between being earthbound by petty restrictions and having the freedom, responsibility, and skill to soar above challenges, both literal and figurative. It was also, perhaps, a quiet nod to the unforgettable day the sky literally came down to meet the manicured cul-de-sac, decisively putting everything, especially Daphne Ellington's warped sense of priorities, firmly, irrevocably in their proper place. He stepped back, surveyed his resilient, scarred, undeniably purposeful vehicle parked proudly, exemplary, in his driveway under the warm coastal sun, and allowed himself a small, brief, deeply satisfied smile before coiling the hose neatly and heading inside his modest cottage, ready, as always, for his next watch, his next call to service, his gaze instinctively drifting towards the endless blue horizon.